This podcast discusses external research, products, and views not endorsed by CSIRO. Please use your own judgment before relying on it. Visit csiro.au/everyday-AI for more.
CSIRO acknowledges the traditional owners of the lands on which this podcast was created. We pay our deepest respects to elders past and present, and to First Nations scientists, storytellers, and listeners.
I'm Briony. I have had the fortunate experience of being part of a test process and using AI to give the best possible chance of childbirth.
For a long time, many of us would have considered a sentence like this to be purely science fiction. But today, artificial intelligence can be with us from the very start of our lives.
We did get a transfer then from that frozen embryo, and that was my son, Rory. And he was embryo selected via AI.
Hello there.
The Eagle has landed.
The CSIRO team.
What can I do for you?
The machines in the factory. Producing a computer program.
Temperature is approaching 500 degrees Celsius.
Beautiful. I've answered all your questions.
They can provide an attractive solution to tomorrow's energy needs.
I'm Jon Whittle, an AI expert from CSIRO, Australia's National Science Agency. And this is Everyday AI, a podcast that looks at how artificial intelligence is changing our daily lives. For our second season, we're talking to people about the different ways AI will likely interact with us, from the cradle to the grave. We'll be hearing from AI experts, health professionals, teachers, parents, and developers about how machine learning and artificial intelligence technology interacts with us throughout our lives. And for our first episode, we're starting right at the beginning, from the moment of conception. We'll come back to Briony's story soon, and we'll also hear about how artificial intelligence is helping doctors monitor premature babies. But first, we're going to find out how AI is being used to help doctors look for healthy eggs, sperm, and embryos.
What we're looking at is exploring the contribution that AI may make in the future to making IVF an easier, simpler, and more affordable process.
This is Peter Illingworth. He's a fertility specialist and IVF Australia Medical Director with Virtus Health. IVF, or in vitro fertilization, is a form of assisted reproductive technology that produced its first successful birth, Louise Brown, in 1978. Today, IVF is common, but success rates can vary. Less than half of women conceive on their first cycle of IVF, and many couples go through multiple cycles without success.
The good thing about IVF is it gives many people the opportunity to have families where otherwise they wouldn't be able to. The downsides of IVF are the cost, the emotional strain, because IVF has a lot of pressures. Everybody who goes through IVF always has a bad day somewhere along the line, and the stress of the uncertainty of the outcome is really tough.
These days, of all the babies born in Australia, 1 in 18 will have been conceived through IVF. That's a pretty high number, and anyone who has been through this journey knows what a bumpy road it can be. Even before you get to the clinic, emotions are high. And once you're there, you're faced with a number of stresses, from undergoing procedures, to the cost, to hoping it will all work. And I can speak from personal experience. My 9-year-old twin daughters were conceived through IVF. Fortunately, it worked for us on the first try. However, it was still a stressful experience. The doctors were only able to retrieve 3 eggs, resulting in 2 embryos, 1 strong and 1 less viable. We were faced with the decision of how many to transfer back into the uterus. We chose both, of course, and those 2 embryos grew up into healthy, amazing little girls. But even today, I sometimes look at my twins and wonder about the less viable embryo and its journey. If you're not familiar with how IVF works, I'll let Peter go through the basics.
When a woman goes through IVF, she normally takes drugs to stimulate her ovaries so that all of the eggs that are growing that month can be collected. Once the eggs are collected, they're joined with sperm, either her partner's or donor sperm, and an embryo is formed after 5 days of growth in the laboratory. The embryo is either transferred back into her or frozen for later use and later transfer, depending on the circumstances.
The success rate of a transfer ranges from between 7 to 55%. This number mostly depends on the patient's age, but many factors will come into play, such as the quality of the sperm, the eggs, or even the parent's lifestyle habits. New research is showing how artificial intelligence can help us improve success rates and increase the chances for hopeful parents. Let's start with sperm.
For men who have healthy numbers of sperm, there's no problem. There's 100 million sperm there. The right sperm will find its way into the right place. However, we also see men who have only absolutely tiny numbers of sperm and have to go through long and invasive surgical procedures to find only a handful of sperm.
In these cases, the process of searching for sperm is currently very time-consuming and difficult.
Many of the sperm, because they're tiny in number, often look abnormal, even though they are healthy sperm. And identifying healthy sperm is a prolonged and difficult process for the embryologists involved. AI may well play a very key role in separating healthy sperm from the other cells in the testicle and may make the whole process of obtaining sperm much more productive and useful for these small number of men who only have a tiny number of sperms.
It takes embryologists about 6 hours to search for sperm in severely infertile men, but AI can do it in just seconds. One new AI algorithm developed by an Australian company has been found to successfully find healthy sperm in men who have something called non-obstructive azoospermia, an infertility condition that affects roughly 5% of couples seeking fertility treatment. The AI is given a large dataset made up of thousands of microscopic photographs of droplets of sperm, complete with other cells and tissues. The sperm cells are highlighted, so the AI can learn and remember which cells to look for. When put to the test, the AI was able to locate sperm in less than 1,000th of the time taken by the humans, and it found more sperm overall in comparison to a human embryologist. And this kind of AI technology is not just limited to sperm.
Artificial intelligence has a better predictive value for identifying which embryo could give rise to a successful pregnancy than a human being doing the same embryo selection process. Every time a woman makes an egg, she cuts her 46 chromosomes in half to create an egg with 23 chromosomes. But she doesn't do that all the time. A lot of the embryos that she creates come from eggs which have either 24 or 22 chromosomes in them. And that is a major factor in why some embryos will implant and others will not.
Embryos are grown in incubators for 5 days before they're deemed viable and transferred into the uterus, or frozen for later use. The incubators take photographs of the embryos every 10 minutes so the embryologists can see a time-lapse of how they're developing.
It is simply impossible for a human being to make any sense out of all of those images. And we see strange things happen. We see cells pop in, pop out, disappear in what seems like almost random ways. And the question is, what do all of those apparently random effects have in terms of predicting the outcome for the embryo?
In comes artificial intelligence. Peter's team recently ran an international study to find out whether an AI tool could be as effective as embryologists at evaluating embryos after the sperm and egg have been combined in the IVF lab. The AI goes through and scans every image to look for patterns that correlate with known outcomes for embryos. It can then predict the embryos that have fetal hearts and those that don't.
It looks at it time and time again and then adjusts the predictive function as it looks at more embryos, and then we test it on a test sample of embryos to validate the process. And we've done that now, iterative approach, many hundreds of times with that system.
Just like with the sperm scenario, this AI has been trained with a dataset of hundreds of thousands of images of embryos.
About 500 images for each embryo, and 500 images for 100,000 embryos is a lot of data. So it gives a high predictive value compared to an embryologist for which embryo will turn into a baby.
The artificial intelligence tool can assess an embryo almost immediately, in about a tenth of the time it takes an embryologist to do the same.
It makes a huge difference to the technicians and the scientists who are doing this work that it can really speed up this role. It makes it much easier for them to obtain a successful outcome.
And just how successful is the AI? Peter says that just like the embryologists, the AI can't see the chromosomes themselves.
But it can identify the risk for an embryo of having the wrong number of chromosomes by using artificial intelligence tools to study the morphology of the shape and the growth of the embryo.
When human embryologists analyze embryos, they're looking for the quality of cells both inside and outside the embryo and the stage of development the embryo is at. An embryo that's growing slowly, for example, is less likely to implant and lead to a pregnancy than an embryo growing at the average speed. Peter says the AI may be used as a screening tool to help embryologists decide which embryos are worth biopsying and which are low enough risk that they don't require detailed genetic tests. Biopsying is a procedure where one or more cells are removed from the embryo in order to analyze its DNA and look for any genetic alteration. This helps determine whether or not that embryo is a healthy one and likely to result in pregnancy.
If an embryo only has a 1% or 2% chance of success, would you choose it for keeping for later or not when it's got such a low chance of success? And here's where the AI may well come in allowing us to identify which of these slow-growing embryos that a human eye would judge as being at low chance of success may still have a good chance of success and be worth freezing.
The AI could also help embryologists to provide more individualized predictions, rather than relying on statistics based on generic groups of people. Ultimately, all this would provide more support for patients who are going through what can often be a series of very difficult and painful decisions. And while many people still may think AI seems a little sci-fi, Peter says the patients' responses have been positive.
One of the issues is what is the public view about the use of artificial intelligence in fertility care. And what we have found was a great deal of enthusiasm from our patients. We were able to recruit 1,100 patients to a randomized controlled trial of artificial intelligence. That suggests that there is not a great deal of underlying hostility to the use of artificial intelligence in the general public in terms of helping them have a family. They are, like us, interested in finding out whether this helps them have a family or not.
The whole thing is scientifically generated. They are stimulating my body kind of unnaturally to kind of get to the stage where I have the most amount of eggs. They are then taking the best eggs and putting them with the best sperm in artificially generated conditions that kind of offer the best view of life for that embryo. The more that science can be helping that process is absolutely beneficial.
This is Briony, who we've heard from at the start of the episode. She's had 2 children through IVF.
I openly talk about it because I think, there's still a lot of people that don't talk about it and feel kind of some level of anxiety around talking about it or apprehension to share their experience.
Briony started her IVF journey with her partner in 2017 after they tried for years to conceive naturally, but without success. Due to her age, she was referred to a fertility specialist.
While she told us it was not impossible for us to conceive naturally, there were issues that both myself and my partner had that would make that more challenging.
In their first round of IVF, they were able to retrieve a number of eggs. But unfortunately, none of their embryos made it through to day 5 in the incubators.
So that was a bit disappointing. They went through the next round, and during that second cycle, we managed to get 2 embryos.
On their second round, the first embryo reached day 5 and then was transferred to Briony's uterus, but it didn't take.
However, the second embryo, which was frozen, was later transferred, and that one did take, and that was my daughter Grace.
With one successful IVF childbirth, Briony and her husband decided to try for a second. Once again, they went through egg retrieval, this time ending up with 3 embryos that reached day 5. It was at this point that Briony and her husband were asked if they wanted to be part of the trial and potentially have AI help analyze their embryos.
I actually felt a little bit nervous. I think there was a little bit of apprehension around, would there be anything detrimental as part of this process to harbour our chances of getting pregnant?
The trial was explained to Briony and her husband it would be non-invasive and not take the place of embryologists. They were also told that they wouldn't know whether their embryo had been chosen by the AI until after the transfer.
I thought, well, if this is something that can help the future of IVF and other people like myself get pregnant, then it's only going to get better by people trialling in this. So I kind of felt very comfortable then moving forward.
Their 3 embryos were graded. Once again, the first embryo transfer didn't work. But the second resulted in the birth of her son. And it was at that point they were told it had been selected by the AI.
I feel really positive that we were part of the study that is potentially helping that accuracy and helping IVF become easier. You know, it's just a really nice kind of story to tell the kids that they were part of something that's a bit of a first.
Concerned about the pressure the process would have on her body and 2 healthy children, Briony and her husband decided not to pursue another round of IVF. But their family story doesn't end there.
I did go on to get pregnant naturally, twins. So my 3rd pregnancy was actually a little boy and a little girl who turned 1 last week, which still fully blows my mind how the sperm manages to meet the egg in the body.
What about people who, for various reasons, aren't ready to have children, but want the chance to try in the future? Peter Illingworth says many of these people might look to freeze their eggs.
One of the major problems with egg freezing is that egg is an incredibly simple-looking structure under a microscope, and all eggs look the same. And it's very hard for a human looking at an egg to say, this is a good egg that will give a baby or a bad egg that won't.
The current tests aren't perfect, and Peter says it's hard to know for sure how the eggs will go once they're frozen for future use.
So the hope is an artificial intelligence system which looks for things the human eye can't see may give us a better response. If, for example, we were able to show that the eggs that she had stored from one egg collection were not very good, then she would know to do further cycles until she had eggs that were of high quality.
Peter thinks AI can even help before eggs are retrieved by giving patients more personal support throughout their IVF journey.
It's very easy to quote general statistics, but all women are different. And identifying the very complex factors that mean that some women will be able to easily have children, other women will find it harder, is a critical part of assessment and giving good guidance about their future. By using artificial intelligence to analyse these data sets, we can provide much more important predictive information for women, aid them in their decision-making as they go through IVF.
I think it's important to note that AI in fertility treatment is still under development and isn't widely available yet. But Peter sees a promising future where this technology will be easily accessible to anyone.
It's highly likely that in 10 years' time, artificial intelligence will be at the heart of IVF and will be working well.
So, we've seen how AI is helpful at the very beginning of the journey. Let's go to the next step and explore how AI is helping support newborns. A team of CSIRO researchers have been testing how AI can monitor and predict neurodevelopment and cognitive outcomes for premature babies by analysing models of their brains.
We are the sci-fi future. We do extract the brain, you can turn it around, you can sort of scroll through it in different directions, and you can see what's happening at every part of it.
Dr. Jessica Bugeja is a postdoctoral fellow in CSIRO's Australian eHealth Research Centre. Jess's team have been studying MRI brain scans of babies who were born prematurely. And just quickly, an MRI, which stands for magnetic resonance imaging, is a safe and painless way to get a super detailed picture of what's going on inside your brain.
So unfortunately, babies can have a stroke in the brain, and depending what area that is in the brain, it can impact a different part of our later outcomes. The people that don't have that sign of any stroke, we want to know, is there something that isn't visual to the eye that is important to predict those later outcomes as well? We have preterm infants that have MR imaging early, so that could be around 30 weeks, as well as at term around 40 weeks.
The infants have follow-up assessments at 3 months, 12 months, and 24 months, and then another imaging scan at 6 years, giving Jess's team a picture of how their brains are developing.
We can segment the brain or sort of pull it out of that MR image and get different metrics. So the brain has different folds, so the depths of those folds, also the width of the fold or the surface area of those folds are all important biomarkers.
These biomarkers are measurements within the scans that give clues about how the baby's brains may develop. These clues help Jess's team find signs about whether the infant could have problems in the future with learning or physical movement. The clue could be differences in the white matter, which is kind of like the brain's highway system, carrying messages from one part of the brain to another. Or it could be signs of damage, like bleeding or strokes. Once they have these biomarker clues, the team tests to see if an AI can pick up more details in the MRI scans than the researchers themselves. Along with the MRI images, Jess's team have also been collecting information about the infants in the trial from all sorts of specialists. These reports all add to the story of how each baby is developing. All of this data is then fed into the AI, and it can then start looking for patterns between what it sees in those early brain scans and how the babies are actually developing later on.
So we just have an MR image. It goes through this deep learning pipeline. It pops out this reconstructed brain, and using that brain, we can get all the metrics that we need. And it's those metrics that will help us to be able to predict those later outcomes.
And that's the power of AI. It can zoom in one of these MRI scans to pick up a level of detail that simply can't be seen by highly trained human experts.
As humans, we can only see that visual, one layer, that image. But AI has this higher thinking to be able to see past the image. It can look at the textures, the lines, and things that we can't see directly.
The full results of Jess's study are still about a year away, but the early findings show that the AI is in fact giving Jess's team more information about the baby's development. And this extra information could help with early diagnoses or predictions of what might happen in a child's future.
Things that we could predict would be different neurodevelopmental outcomes. So perhaps they might have some difficulty walking or some difficulty moving some part of their body, as well as behavioural outcomes. So we could predict things like a diagnosis of ADHD, as well as communication and attention and memory.
Take cerebral palsy, for example. This is a group of neurological conditions that affect how a child moves and coordinates their body. It's caused by damage to the developing brain, usually before babies are born. There often aren't any symptoms until around the time the child is in preschool, so it's generally not diagnosed when a baby is first born. That's how AI could help, by picking up conditions like this much, much earlier.
And is there anything we can do earlier on to help them perform better? And that brings us into that early intervention conversation, where what can we do to give more attention in a particular area to help them build more connections in their brain to be able to compensate for any prediction of an adverse outcome.
Our brains are pretty amazing. You might have heard of the term neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to change and adapt with different experiences. You can think of it like creating new roads in your brain. The more you practice something, like learning to play a musical instrument, the stronger these new roads or connections get. That's why after a while, it becomes like second nature.
So a part of our brain that hasn't spoken to another part won't have a connection yet. But if we keep trying to make them talk to each other, eventually we can actually build a physical connection between them.
Jess's team have seen some really incredible results. They've looked at brain scans of people who went through rehab after a stroke and noticed changes in their scans.
Just with having a rehab physio intervention program over a period of time, it has been shown that we can build to strengthen those structures in the brain.
If there's an early sign of a problem, doctors can recommend different types of therapy to help a baby develop their movement skills. Therapies like robotic exoskeletons can help children take their first steps.
It uses a sensor on the foot to be able to detect what part of the gait cycle you're in. So whether we're putting our toe down or taking our heel off, and it senses how much assistance should be given at that particular point in our gait cycle. And in doing so, it gives the right amount of assistance at the right time.
These robotic suits have helped people with cerebral palsy walk further, faster, and more efficiently. As we learn more about these tools, we may find they offer more long-term impacts than simply improving movement.
Does it do something more internally as well? So does it improve the muscle structure? Does it improve the joint function? And as a follow-on to that, does it end up changing our brain white matter tracks?
If AI can support researchers and doctors to recommend interventions to help babies much earlier, it could lead to incredibly improved outcomes for the development of babies born with neurological or cognitive impairments.
When we've identified that some adverse outcome might happen in the future, can we use these devices to help reduce the probability of that adverse outcome happening, or can we remove that adverse outcome happening at all?
At the very least, AI will lift some of the burden off the medical scientists working with premature babies, and similar technology could be used throughout a person's lifetime.
We're not trying to create the next bionic population, but we could collect that data and we might be able to use all of that to help predict a fall before the fall happens, especially with the aging population. Maybe we might be able to find signs in their vitals that show that this person needs help now before something else bad happens.
Of course, not everyone will want to know about the potential challenges their baby might face. Hearing about something that could happen in the future can be overwhelming and could change the way a child is treated by the people around them.
We do have to be careful to be sensitive with that information, to not try to scare anyone, and to make sure that everybody knows that this is not 100%. It's just a possible prediction of something that could happen. If everyone was more collaborative and we could keep getting the data set getting bigger and bigger and bigger, the results are only going to get better. And it would be in no way to replace clinicians' work, it would just be to support them in their profession.
Whether it's scanning babies' brains, helping choose healthy sperm and eggs, or selecting the strongest embryos for IVF, AI is here to lend a hand. More and more, it's becoming a powerful tool for doctors and experts to help them do their important work even more effectively. But it won't be taking their place anytime soon. Here's Peter Illingworth again.
Every person that we see to help have their family has a different view about how they want it to be done. A different personal, ethnic and religious perspective about how they want their care to be delivered. And you can't override that with an artificial intelligence system.
From the patient's perspective, Briony agrees.
I think we're still in that world where systems go wrong and machines don't work all the time. So I think just knowing that there's always kind of a bit of a check that's making sure that the machine's working, that there's that kind of human fallback, definitely made us feel more comfortable about it.
With any new technology, there are risks and challenges. New rules and regulations need to be developed alongside them. And lots of tests and trials need to happen before we can feel confident in using it, especially in healthcare. But as we've heard today, AI holds significant promise for the future of healthcare. The most important thing is to make sure this technology is safe and reliable before it becomes an everyday part of our healthcare system.
AI should be considered a tool to be used by humans responsibly. Potential abuses could include not taking on patients for care, raising the insurance values, costs if people are found but through these predictive tools to have a lower chance of success. But we've managed all of that before with genetic testing. So I think that it's very similar to the ethical challenges that genetic testing poses in the community. And I think that if we keep a pragmatic approach of looking at each individual application, each individual context, rather than generalizing, I think we'll be able to make sensible decisions that will allow us, society, to get the maximum benefit out of artificial intelligence tools and avoid the risk of harm.
We started this episode with a story that sounded like it could have been sci-fi not too long ago. And now we've heard how AI will be working side by side with medical professionals, helping families from conception to making sure they have a head start on their development right up until the age they start school. In our next episode, we'll be diving into AI in education and asking the question, should we be worried about artificial intelligence taking over the classroom?
We need to prepare our students for the future where some of the members in their teams are not going to be human.
I'm Jon Whittle. Thanks for joining me for Everyday AI. Thanks to our guests, Briony, Dr. Peter Illingworth, and Jess Bugeja. Everyday AI is a CSIRO series created by me and Nikki Galovich. Alexandra Persley is our supervising producer. Laura Briley-Newton is our producer and sound engineer from Audiocraft. Script and production support by Jess Hamilton. We'd love to know what you think. So please subscribe to Everyday AI and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts.